In this video, I'm going to show you how to read measurements on a tape measure. Welcome back to another Turkstra's Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to be talking about reading measurements. We're going to be talking about measurements in imperial, in metric, and converting from one to the other. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is measuring in imperial. That's inches, feet, yards, and whatnot. So if you're having to measure in inches, like on this tape measure, you've got the 1 inch mark, 2 inch, 3 inches. The inches are going to be the longest lines on the tape measure, and measuring down to the inch is pretty easy. It's when you get to under an inch is to where people sometimes have difficulty, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. On this piece of paper, I've got illustrated 1 inch. So this would be 1 inch, that would be 2 inches, and in between are all the fractions broken down in between, and that's what we're going to get into now. So like I said before, on a tape measure, the longest lines are going to be the 1 inch mark. The second longest line, height-wise, between each inch is going to be the ½ inch mark. And halfway between half and 1, or half and the next number, in this case 2, are going to be the quarter marks. So you've got 1/4 would be 2 quarters or a half, and then 3/4, because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters between an inch. In between the quarter marks, which are the next shortest lines, are going to be your 1/8 of an inch. And once again, there's 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which is why, this is 1/8. This would be 2/8, or broken down a quarter, then 3/8, 5/8, 7/8. So like if someone asks you to measure down to 1 3/4, it's simple. You just take these lines, 1, 2, 3, that's 3/4. And if someone was to ask you, 1 3/8, it's, 1 and 1, 2, 3 of the 8th lines. You just have to remember that it's all kind of broken down half of each other. So half is half of 1 inch, and then a quarter is half of ½ an inch, and an 1/8 is half of 1/4 of an inch. So this tape measure here is broken down to 30 seconds within the first foot. So under the first foot, it's broken down all the way to 30 seconds of an inch. And beyond that, it's going to be down to 1/16 of an inch, which is pretty common for a construction tape measure, in North America. That's what you're going to have. And that's kind of nice because you can get nice, accurate measurements within the first foot, and you can use that wherever you need it. And beyond that, it's going to be 1/16 of an inch. So on the drawing here, like I said, you've got half, quarters, 1/8. So halfway between your 1/8 lines are going to be 1/16. They're going to be like here, here. And then if you're measuring down to 30 seconds of an inch, it's going to be halfway between that. And there's going to be 32 of them between each inch. And before we move on to talking about metric, there's really only one conversion you need to know if you're going back and forth between metric and imperial. And that is that there are 25.4 millimeters in an inch. So anytime you need to convert from inches to metric, like this, sometimes you'll find a tape measure like this that has metric and imperial, and you'll be working on a project where maybe you've got material that's in both dimensions, or parts or something that are in both dimensions. As long as you know that in 1 inch there are 25.4 millimeters, you can times that up or divide it down any way you need to work it to convert from one to the other. So now moving on to metric, which arguably is going to be an easier format to work with, less common in North America, but probably easier. You'll find that people that grew up with imperial are going to say that it's easier, and I'm kind of one of those people. I just know imperial, but metric is easier because the rule of thumb is that everything is divisible by 10. So on this tape measure, you've got, like I said before, inches and centimeters. So on this piece of paper, I've got representative of 1 centimeter. So this is 1, that's 2 centimeters. In between are millimeters, and already you can see it makes way more sense than imperial because you've just got 10 lines between each centimeter, and that's a millimeter. So halfway between is going to be 5 millimeters. And on the tape measure, you'll see the halfway mark is extended a bit just to make it easier, but all the lines after that are all the same height. It's just 1 through 10 millimeters, and it's really easy. And like I said, if you're converting to inches, it's just going to be 25.4, so it's going to be, longer than this piece of paper, but it's super easy to convert back and forth and really easy to use. So just a couple examples of measuring, like this piece of wood here, if you measure across, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it lands right on the half, so that's going to be 5.5 inches. So measuring the same piece of wood lengthwise, you can see where it lands here. It lands right on 7/8 because there's 7 of them before here and here. So if you didn't know that off the top of your head, you can literally count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 12 and 7/8 of an inch. So measuring the same board width-wise in metric, we've got just under 13 centimeters. So it's, how many is it? It's 8. So it's 13.8 centimeters. Or like I said, you times that up by 10, 138 millimeters. So measuring the same board in metric lengthwise, we're past the 30 but under 33. So it lands on the 6 millimeter mark. So we've got 32.6 centimeters. So there you go, guys. That's pretty much the gist of measuring metric and imperial and converting. I know it can be kind of complicated at first, but you know, give it a practice. Measure a few pieces of wood, measure some things around the house. You'll find that you figure it out really quickly. If you're in the need of some good measuring equipment, measuring tapes, definitely visit your local Turkstra Lumber in Southern Ontario, Canada. And if you're actually kind of wondering about how to use a tape measure itself and all the different purposes and techniques to use a tape measure, visit Turkstra Lumber on YouTube, you know, right where you are right now on the channel. There's a lot of great content, a really great video on there about how to use a tape measure. And like always, guys, the more you build, the better you get.